I want a man who already has influence, status, and connections, not someone still climbing toward them. My fiancée told me during our final argument together. I quietly ended everything and left. Months later, she attended a charity auction and realized the entire event was being funded by my company without her knowing. I want a man who already has influence, status, and connections, not someone still climbing toward them. She said it quietly, not with anger, not with tears, just quietly, like she'd been rehearsing it, like she finally found the courage to say the thing she'd been thinking for months. I looked at her for a long moment. The apartment was still. The city hummed outside our window like it always did, indifferent, relentless, unbothered by the fact that something was breaking inside this room. She was standing near the kitchen counter with her arms crossed, waiting. I think she expected me to argue, to defend myself, to beg her to reconsider. Instead, I walked to the coat rack near the front door, picked up my keys, and slipped on my jacket. "Terrence." Her voice followed me. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just being honest." I turned around one last time. "I know," I said, and I meant it. That was the last real conversation we had as an engaged couple. At the time, she believed she was walking away from someone ordinary, someone who would spend the next few years spinning his wheels, watching the world pass him by, wondering where things went wrong. Months later, she walked into a charity auction on the Upper West Side, and my company's name was printed on every single wall in the building. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. My name is Terrence Webb. I was 31 when this happened. Rochelle was 29. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. We shared a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place that felt impressive until you started comparing it to the penthouses your coworkers lived in. That comparison thing, that was always Rochelle's issue, not mine. I worked in tech infrastructure, not the glamorous side of tech, not the flashy side with the magazine covers and the TED Talks. The side that keeps the systems running quietly in the background. The invisible side, which, looking back, was probably the perfect metaphor for everything. I was the kind of person who built things that most people never saw, and Rochelle had started to confuse invisible with insignificant. The first time I noticed the shift was about 14 months before that final argument. We were at a dinner party hosted by her coworker, a finance guy named Preston who wore a different watch every time I saw him and laughed a little too loud at his own jokes. Rochelle had gotten dressed up, really dressed up. I wore a clean button-down and dark slacks. She looked at me before we left like she wanted to say something. She didn't, but I felt it. At the party, Preston had this crowd around him. Investment stories, deal stories, name-dropping stories. Rochelle laughed at every single one. I stood near the bookshelf with a drink in my hand, watching her light up in a way she hadn't lit up around me in weeks. On the cab ride home, she was quiet for a few minutes. Then she said, "Preston just closed a $14 million deal." I nodded. "Good for him." Another silence. "He has a whole team under him now. They're expanding to London." She looked out the window. "Don't you ever want something like that?" I thought about it honestly. "I want what I'm building," I said. "Not what he's building." She didn't respond, but I felt the distance between us grow about 3 inches in that moment. Looking back, I should have noticed that earlier. But when you love someone, you make allowances. You tell yourself it's just a bad week. You tell yourself she's stressed. You tell yourself the person you fell in love with is still in there somewhere, underneath the comparison and the social climbing and the growing silence. Sometimes love makes you optimistic past the point of reason. Over the following months, it got quieter between us. Not loud fighting, not dramatic blow-ups, just quiet. She started attending more events without me. Networking dinners, industry mixers, things she described as necessary for her trajectory. I never stopped her. She started spending more time on her phone when we were together, scrolling, watching, liking the feeds of people who had arrived, people who had already made it. I'd be sitting across from her at our kitchen table, and she'd be somewhere else entirely. "You should really get on LinkedIn more," she told me once. "Visibility matters." "I'm not really worried about visibility," I said. She looked at me the way you look at someone who just doesn't get it. That look, I started seeing it more and more. Here's the thing nobody tells you about quiet ambition. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. It doesn't come with announcements. It doesn't come with visible momentum. There's no moment where people around you suddenly understand what you're building. You just keep building. For about 2 years before our relationship started to crack, I'd been quietly working on something on the side. A platform. An infrastructure as a service model built specifically for mid-sized nonprofits and charitable organizations. Organizations that desperately needed tech support, but couldn't afford what the big firms charged. My business partner was a woman named Dana. Sharp, focused, the kind of person who could read a balance sheet the way most people read a text message. We weren't loud about it. We didn't post about it. We just worked. After hours. Early mornings. Weekends when Rochelle was out at brunches and events and mixers. She never asked much about it. And I never pushed her to. I told her once that Dana and I were working on a client proposal that could change our trajectory significantly. She nodded and went back to her phone. That conversation stayed in my head longer than I expected. By the time we hit our 4th year together, there was a version of Rochelle I still loved deeply. But there was a new version I barely recognized. The new version collected social proof the way other people collected debt. She needed to be in the right rooms, with the right people, wearing the right things. It wasn't about happiness. It was about optics. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped fitting the optics she was building for herself. One evening she came home from a work event still buzzing with energy. "I met someone tonight," she said. Not romantically. She was quick to clarify that. "His name is Marcus. He runs his own consulting firm. 3 offices. He has investors from Dubai." "Okay," I said. "He was asking about you. What you do. What did you tell him?" She paused. Just half a second. But I caught it. "I said you were in tech. Not that you're brilliant. Not that you're building something. Not that I'm proud of you. Just in tech." Like it was something to explain away. I didn't say anything. But I filed it away. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came about 6 weeks later. We were at her cousin's birthday dinner. There was a man there. Older, successful, the kind of man who wore confidence like a second suit. Her cousin introduced him as someone who ran a private equity group. His name was Gerald. Gerald spent most of the dinner speaking loudly about his portfolio companies, his board seats, his upcoming retreat in the Swiss Alps. I was polite, quiet. I asked him 1 or 2 genuine questions about the regulatory environment he was navigating. He gave me a surface answer and then turned back to the people he deemed worth impressing. Later, in the car, Rochelle said, "You should have engaged with him more." I asked him questions. "You let him dismiss you." She shook her head. "You always do that. You retreat." "I don't retreat. I just don't perform." There's a difference between performing and commanding a room, Terrence. I kept my eyes on the road. Men like Gerald have access to things. Connections. Opportunities. That's how this world works. I said nothing. "You don't understand how the world works." She said it quietly, but the look on her face hurt more than the words. What happened 2 weeks later made everything clearer. Dana called me on a Thursday morning with news I'd been waiting months to hear. We'd secured a partnership with a major philanthropic foundation out of Boston. 7-figure commitment. Multi-year contract. They wanted us to expand our platform to serve charitable organizations across 12 cities. I sat in my car in the parking garage and let the news settle over me like something warm. Then I drove home, made dinner, and waited for Rochelle. She came in around 8. Jacket still on. Phone still in her hand. "How was your day?" I asked. "Exhausting." She set her bag down. "We had a whole thing with the Harrington account." "I have some news," I said. Dana and I secured a major partnership today. It's significant. It changes what we've been building." She looked up from her phone for a second. "How significant?" 7 figures. 12 cities. A pause. "That's good," she said. And then she went back to her phone. "That's good." I stood in the kitchen for a moment. "That's good." I thought about what she'd said about Gerald. About Marcus. About Preston. About the way her whole face changed when those men spoke. And I thought about the fact that I'd just told her the biggest professional news of my adult life. And she said that's good. Like I told her I found parking. The final argument didn't happen overnight. It built. The way pressure builds inside something sealed too tight. It was a Sunday. Late afternoon. That specific Sunday light that makes everything look both beautiful and sad. She had been on the phone for most of the morning. I could hear her laughing from the other room. That particular laugh she saved for people she was trying to impress. When she came out, she told me about another event she'd been invited to. "It's an exclusive fundraiser," she said. "Black tie. Marcus is hosting a table." "Marcus from the work event." "Yes." She said it without flinching. "He's connected, Terrence. These are the kinds of rooms I need to be in." "You're engaged." "I know I'm engaged." Her voice sharpened. "I'm talking about professionally. You've been to 3 events with this man in 2 months. Because he has access to things that matter." She set her coffee cup down harder than she needed to. Do you even understand that? Access matters. Influence matters. Who you know matters. I know, I said calmly. I've been building those things. She looked at me, and something in her face shifted. Not into cruelty, into something worse. Honesty. That's the problem, she said quietly. Building. You're always building. Always working towards something. Always about to get there. Most successful things take time to build. I don't want a man who's building toward it, Terrence. Her voice dropped. I want a man who's already there. Influence. Status. Connections. Real ones. Established ones. Not potential. Not someday. The apartment went quiet. I want a man who already has influence, status, and connections. Not someone still climbing toward them. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I'd proposed to 8 months ago. The woman I'd planned a life with. The woman I'd loved quietly and faithfully for 4 years. She meant every word. I could see it. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I walked to the coat rack near the front door. Picked up my keys. I'm going to need the ring back, I said. Her mouth opened slightly. Terrence. I'm not angry, I said. I understand what you want. I just know I'm not going to change who I am to fit it. She stared at me. So that's it. That's it. She expected a fight. She expected begging. She expected me to fall apart in that kitchen and grab her hands and promise her I'd be more visible, more impressive, more Gerald. Instead, I opened the door, and I walked out. The silence I left behind me said everything I didn't. The ring was in an envelope outside the apartment door the next morning. I picked it up on my way to work without opening it. I didn't need to look at it to know what it meant. The next 3 months were the strangest kind of hard. Not dramatic hard. Not the kind of hard that looks like anything from the outside. Just the quiet, hollow kind. The kind where you reach for your phone to tell someone something, and then remember there's no longer a someone. The kind where Sunday mornings, which used to be full, are suddenly very empty. I worked. That's mostly what I did. Dana and I had momentum now, and momentum doesn't wait for your personal life to catch up. We were onboarding new clients, hiring, building out the platform infrastructure, negotiating contracts I'd spent 2 years positioning us for. I had a meeting with a city councilwoman who wanted to pilot our platform for 3 major nonprofits under the city's umbrella. I had a call with a foundation in Chicago that wanted to replicate what we were doing in the Midwest. I had investors reaching out through channels I hadn't opened yet. The world was starting to pay attention, but quietly, the way it always does with things that are actually built right. I moved out of the Midtown apartment and into a place in Brooklyn, smaller, cleaner, mine. No dining table where someone used to sit across from me scrolling. No coat rack with a second jacket. Just mine. I heard about Rochelle through mutual friends, the way you always do. She was fine. Still working. Still attending the right events. A mutual friend, named Camille, mentioned her name once while we were getting coffee. She asked about you. Camille said carefully. Said she heard you were doing well. I'm doing all right, I said. She seemed. Camille paused. Curious. I nodded. Didn't ask follow-up questions. Camille studied me for a second. You're not even going to ask what she said? No. Camille stirred her coffee. You're different, you know that? Different how? Like settled. You seem settled. I thought about it. I think I just finally know what I'm building, I said. And I stopped worrying about whether anyone else understood it. Camille nodded slowly. She didn't understand it, she said quietly. I know. About 5 months after the breakup, something happened that I hadn't planned for. Dana came to me with a proposal. A major nonprofit gala was being organized in the city, an annual charity auction benefiting youth education programs across 3 boroughs. The organization running it had been using outdated systems for years and was hemorrhaging administrative costs. They needed a complete infrastructure overhaul, and they needed a sponsor. Dana had been in contact with their board for weeks. They want us, she said. Full platform implementation. And they want to acknowledge us as a founding sponsor of this year's event. Our name on everything. I looked at the proposal. The event was called the Meridian Gala. Black tie. Upper West Side. One of the more respected charity events in the city's social calendar. How visible is this event? I asked. Dana smiled. Very. I signed the agreement on a Wednesday afternoon. By Friday, the invitations had gone out. I didn't think about who might attend. That wasn't even the furthest thing from my mind. It just genuinely didn't occur to me. I was thinking about the infrastructure rollout. About the 3-city expansion we were planning for Q1. About the team I was building. Not about Rochelle. Not at all. 2 weeks before the event, Camille texted me. Are you going to the Meridian Gala? I typed back. I'll be there. We're sponsoring it. 3 dots. Then, oh, wow, okay, I didn't think much of it. The night of the Meridian Gala was cold and clear. The kind of New York evening that feels like the city is showing off. The venue was a converted space in the West 80s. High ceilings, warm lighting, the kind of room that makes everyone inside it feel like something important is about to happen. Our logo was everywhere. Not aggressively, tastefully. The way things look when someone with good design sense handles placement. On the printed programs. On the digital displays near the entrance. On the banners flanking the main stage. On the sponsor wall near the coat check. Dana met me at the entrance, sharp in navy and smiling with the particular satisfaction of someone who had helped build something real. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Good," I said, and I meant it simply, not performatively. Just genuinely good. We went inside. The room was filling steadily. The board members greeted me warmly. The executive director, a woman named Patricia who had been running this organization for 11 years, shook my hand with both of hers and said, "What your company has done for us already has changed how we operate." Genuinely. "Thank you. It's what the platform is for," I said. She introduced me to 3 other organization directors, 2 city officials, and a foundation president I'd been trying to get a meeting with for 4 months. He handed me his card before I could hand him mine. The room felt alive. I found a quiet corner near the bar and watched it all for a moment. This was what I'd been building toward. Not the room, not the visibility, but the legitimacy, the respect, the quiet recognition from people who understood what real work looked like. I didn't need to announce it. It was just present. I didn't see her come in. I was in a conversation with the foundation president, whose name was Robert Shun, and who wanted to discuss a partnership that would have been unthinkable to me 3 years ago, when Dana touched my arm lightly. "Don't react," she said quietly under the conversation. I glanced at her. Her eyes moved toward the entrance. Instinct made me follow them. And there she was. Rochelle. She was with a small group. 2 women I didn't recognize and a man in a fitted blazer who I assumed was Marcus. She looked the way she always looked at events like this. Composed, deliberate, dressed to signal arrival. She was scanning the room the way she always did when she walked into a new space, cataloging it, reading the social geography. She hadn't seen me yet. I turned back to Robert Chun and continued the conversation. I heard later, from Camille, who had also attended, exactly how it unfolded for Rochelle. But I also saw parts of it myself from across the room. The first moment was at the coat check. She would have seen the sponsor wall there. Camille told me later that Rochelle had stopped mid-step when she saw the banner, presented by Web and Dana Infrastructure Solutions. Camille said she saw Rochelle's head tilt, the way it does when something doesn't quite compute. She would have recognized the name, Web, but she probably told herself it was a coincidence. A common name. She probably dismissed it and moved into the main room. The second moment came when she picked up the event program. I was across the room when I noticed her standing near one of the cocktail tables, program open in her hand. Marcus was talking beside her. She wasn't listening. Her eyes were moving down the page. I watched her find the sponsor section. Web and Dana Infrastructure Solutions, founding sponsor and technology partner. Below it, a brief company description. Our mission statement. The platform overview. And below that, standard for these programs, a photo. Dana and me. Taken 3 months ago at a client event. I watched Rochelle go still. Completely still. The way people go still when reality rearranges itself without their permission. Camille found me about 20 minutes later. "She knows," she said simply. "I figured. She's been asking people about you. The staff. The board members." Camille paused. "Patricia told her you were instrumental in the platform overhaul. That without the sponsorship, the event might not have happened this year." I sipped my drink. She looked. Camille searched for the word. Unsettled. "She'll be fine," I said. "Terrence." "She'll be fine, Camille." The auction portion of the evening began around 9. I was seated at the main sponsor table with Dana, Robert Chun, Patricia, and 2 board members. The room had shifted into that particular energy that charity auctions create. Competitive generosity, social performance, genuine enthusiasm all mixed together. I made 2 bids. One item. A week at a lake house in Vermont that I planned to use for a company retreat. During the 3rd auction item, I became aware of someone approaching the table from my peripheral vision. I didn't turn immediately. Then I heard her voice. "Terrence." I turned. Rochelle was standing at the edge of the table. She looked composed. She always looked composed in public. That had always been one of her gifts. But underneath it, in the slight tension around her eyes, in the way she was holding her clutch just a bit too tight, She was anything but. Rochelle, I said. Evenly. Warmly, even. The way you greet someone you once loved and no longer feel the need to wound. I didn't know you'd be here, she said. I didn't know you'd be here either. A pause. Her eyes moved briefly to the banner behind the stage. Back to me. Your company. She gestured vaguely. All of this. We partnered with them about 4 months ago, I said. They needed a platform overhaul. It made sense. She nodded slowly. The auction host was speaking in the background. The room was buzzing. She looked at me the way people look at something they thought they had fully understood and are now realizing they never understood at all. You've been busy, she said quietly. I've always been busy, I said. You just weren't watching. It wasn't cruelty. It was just the truth. She opened her mouth slightly, closed it. Dana appeared beside me with a gentle hand on my arm. Not possessively, just practically. Robert wants to finish the conversation about the Chicago rollout before the program ends. Of course. I looked back at Rochelle. It's good to see you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. And I turned back to the table. Behind me, she stood there for another moment. I didn't watch her go, but I felt something settle in my chest. Quiet, final, clean. Camille called me the next morning. I sat with her for a bit after you talked to her, she said. How is she? A pause. She cried in the bathroom. I was quiet. She kept saying she didn't understand. That you never told her how serious things were getting. I told her, I said. She wasn't listening. I know, Camille said softly. Is she okay? She will be. Another pause. She asked me if you were seeing anyone. What did you tell her? That you seemed happy. That's accurate, I said. Here's what I understood, in the weeks after the Meridian Gala, about everything that had happened. Rochelle wasn't a villain. That's the thing people get wrong when they hear stories like this. She wasn't malicious. She wasn't cruel at her core. She was someone who had learned, somewhere along the way, that a man's worth was measured in what he already had, not in what he was building. In what was visible, not in what was real. She had been taught to read the surface and trust it completely. And I had been building underground. The tragedy wasn't that she left. The tragedy was that she was standing right next to something extraordinary for 4 years and never once looked down to see the foundation being laid beneath her feet. She saw quiet and called it weakness. She saw patience and called it stagnation. She saw a man who didn't perform and assumed there was nothing worth performing. She was wrong, but I'd stopped needing her to know that. The Chicago expansion launched 8 months after the gala. The city pilot we'd worked on with the councilwoman became a model that 2 other cities requested to replicate. Robert Chin's foundation came on as a strategic investor. Dana and I hired our 12th full-time employee. I gave a talk at a conference in Atlanta, not because I wanted visibility, but because the organizers asked and the topic was genuinely interesting and I had something real to say. I still don't post much. I still don't perform. I still don't walk into rooms trying to command them. I just walk in. And somehow, increasingly, the room turns. Not because I changed. Because the world finally caught up to what I was doing. I don't think about Rochelle often. Not because I'm bitter. I'm genuinely not. But because the version of myself that needed her to believe in me doesn't exist anymore. That man stood in a kitchen one Sunday afternoon and made a quiet decision. I will not shrink. I will not perform. I will not become Gerald or Preston or Marcus to deserve love. I will keep building. And whoever is meant to be beside me will recognize what they're standing next to. I haven't found that person yet, but I'm not anxious about it. I'm building. A mutual friend told me, months later, that Rochelle had been at another event, a smaller one, where someone mentioned my company. She had apparently just nodded, said nothing, but her face had done something quiet, something that looked, the mutual friend said, like a very private grief. I understood it. Grief for the version of the future she had held in her hands and let go of because it didn't look like what she expected. Grief is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing very still in a room full of people, realizing that the man whose logo is on every wall around her was once handing her coffee in a shared apartment on Tuesday mornings. I hope she finds peace with it. I genuinely do. She wanted influence. She just never realized she already had it beside her. By the time she understood what she was standing next to, I was already somewhere else entirely.